Depression is one of the most complex mental health conditions, affecting millions of people around the world. While environmental factors such as stress, trauma, and lifestyle play major roles, genetics also contribute significantly to why some individuals are more vulnerable to depression than others. Depression is not just a matter of emotional strength or personal willpower. It is shaped by biological, chemical, and inherited influences. Understanding the genetic component of depression offers deep insight into why this condition runs in families, why some people respond differently to life challenges, and how biology interacts with environment to shape mental health. The relationship between depression and genetics begins with family history. Research consistently shows that depression tends to occur within families. If someone has a parent, sibling, or close relative with depression, their own risk increases. Twin studies have provided some of the strongest evidence for genetic influence. Identical twins who share nearly 100% of their DNA show much higher rates of shared depression compared to fraternal twins, who share only about 50% of their genetic material. This research indicates that approximately 40–50% of depression risk may be inherited. However, genetics alone do not determine destiny. A person may inherit vulnerability, but whether depression actually develops depends on many additional factors. One of the most important genetic influences involves neurotransmitters, chemicals responsible for regulating mood and emotional responses. Genes affect how the brain produces, releases, and reabsorbs neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. For example, variations in a gene called 5-HTT-LPR, which influences serotonin transport, have been linked to increased sensitivity to stress. Individuals with certain versions of this gene may react more strongly to difficult life events, making them more likely to develop depression when faced with trauma or chronic stress. This doesn't mean the gene directly causes depression, rather it shapes emotional sensitivity and stress response. Another genetic factor involves brain structure and function. Some genes influence how the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, responds to threats or negative experiences. Others affect the hippocampus, which plays a role in memory and mood regulation. Studies show that people with a family history of depression sometimes have inherited differences in these brain regions, making them more prone to emotional imbalance. These inherited differences do not guarantee depression, but they create a biological foundation that increases risk under certain conditions. Genetics also interact with hormones in the body's stress response system. The HPA-axis A system, involving the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands, plays a key role in managing stress. Some people inherit a more sensitive or reactive HPA-axis, leading to higher stress hormone levels, such as cortisol, during difficult periods. When cortisol stays elevated for too long, it disrupts mood regulation, sleep, appetite, and energy levels, all of which can contribute to depression. Genetic differences can influence how quickly cortisol levels return to normal after stress. In individuals with increased genetic sensitivity, stress may linger longer, increasing vulnerability. Despite the strong genetic influence, depression is not a purely biological condition. Genetics create a predisposition, but environment determines activation. A person may carry risk genes their entire life without developing depression if they are exposed to supportive, stable, and nurturing environments. On the other hand, someone with high genetic vulnerability may develop depression after experiencing trauma, long-term stress, or emotional neglect. This dynamic is known as the gene-environment interaction. It explains why two individuals with the same genetic risk can have completely different outcomes. One may thrive, while the other may struggle, depending on lifestyle, environment, and emotional support. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, are a powerful example of this interaction. Children who grow up in environments with abuse, neglect, conflict, or instability are far more likely to develop depression later in life, especially if they also carry genetic risk. Trauma and genetics can amplify each other, weakening emotional resilience. On the other hand, protective factors such as strong family support, positive social relationships, healthy school environments, and access to mental health care can buffer genetic risks. Another important aspect is epigenetics changes in gene expression caused by environmental factors. Stress, trauma, nutrition, and lifestyle can switch on or switch off certain genes related to mood regulation. This means that genetics are not static. The environment influences how genes behave. For example, chronic stress may activate genes that increase inflammation or weaken serotonin pathways, contributing to depression. Epigenetic changes can sometimes be passed down through generations, meaning that emotional experiences in one generation may influence vulnerability in the next. A powerful reminder of how deeply genetics and environment are connected. Genetics also influence how people respond to depression treatment. Some individuals metabolize medications differently based on their genetic makeup. This explains why one antidepressant works well for one person, but not for another. Genetic testing is becoming more common in mental health care to help match patients with medications that align best with their biology. This personalized approach improves treatment outcomes and reduces trial and error in medication selection. It's important to highlight that genetic risk is not the same as genetic certainty. Having a family history of depression does not doom anyone to develop the condition. Rather, it provides valuable knowledge for self-awareness and prevention. Individuals with genetic vulnerability can take proactive steps to maintain mental health, including stress management, regular exercise, strong social connections, healthy nutrition, adequate sleep, and early intervention when symptoms appear. Understanding your genetic predisposition empowers you to make informed decisions and seek help early. Early recognition is essential. If someone knows depression runs in their family, they can pay closer attention to emotional warnings, such as persistent sadness, loss of interest, irritability, fatigue, or changes in sleep, and seek support before symptoms escalate. Family history can also encourage open conversations about mental health, reducing stigma and encouraging treatment. In conclusion, depression and genetics are deeply intertwined, but genetics do not control your destiny. They shape vulnerability, not outcome. Environment, lifestyle, emotional support, and personal choices all play powerful roles in mental health. The key is awareness. Understanding genetic risk helps individuals recognize symptoms early, seek treatment sooner, and build a life that supports emotional well-being. Depression influenced by genetics is still treatable, and with the right support, anyone can heal, recover, and live a fulfilling life.